Have you ever noticed that the people everyone worries about are usually the loud ones? The rebellious child. The emotional child. The child who constantly asks for attention. But there was another child in the family. A child nobody worried about, because they never caused problems. They were responsible, quiet, easy, and everyone assumed they were fine. But what if they weren't? What if the easiest child to raise became the adult carrying the heaviest emotional burden? And what if the praise they received growing up was actually hiding something much deeper? Something that still affects them today. If you've ever been called mature for your age, if you've always handled everything on your own, if asking for help feels strangely uncomfortable, then this story might feel more personal than you expect. Imagine two children growing up in the same house. One cries loudly when they're upset. The other stays quiet. One demands attention. The other waits patiently. One openly expresses every emotion. The other keeps everything inside. Which child do you think receives the most attention? Most families don't do this intentionally. They're simply responding to whoever seems to need them most. The loud child gets comfort. The struggling child gets support. The difficult child gets attention. And the easy child? They get overlooked. Not because they aren't loved. Not because anyone is trying to hurt them. But because everyone assumes they're okay. After all, they never complain. They never ask for much. They seem so mature. So responsible. So independent. But here's the first thing most people never realize. Children aren't naturally independent. They become independent when they learn dependence isn't working. Think about that for a moment. A child doesn't wake up one day and decide they don't need comfort. They slowly learn that needing comfort doesn't change anything. So they stop asking. Not because the need disappeared, because hope disappeared. And that's where the hidden cost begins. At first, being the easy child feels rewarding. Adults praise you. Teachers love you. Relatives admire you. You become the child everyone points to as an example. Why can't you be more like them? Look how mature they are. They never give us any trouble. Hearing those words feels good. For a while. But every compliment comes with an unspoken message. Stay this way. Don't need too much. Don't be difficult. Don't take up space. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin editing yourself. You stop sharing certain feelings. You hide certain struggles. You learn which emotions are acceptable, and which emotions make people uncomfortable. Pause for a second. Think about your own childhood. When you were upset, did you feel safe expressing it? Or did you feel responsible for managing it alone? When something hurt you, did someone help carry the weight? Or did you quietly carry it yourself? Your answer might explain more about your adult life than you think. Because children don't just learn how to behave. They learn who they're allowed to be. And the easy child often learns something dangerous. My needs are less important than everyone else's. That belief doesn't stay in childhood. It grows up with you. Years later, you're the friend everyone calls during a crisis. The one who always listens, always supports, always understands. But somehow, nobody really knows what's happening inside your own mind. You know everyone else's problems. Yet very few people know yours. Not because they don't care. Because you've become so good at hiding them. You've spent years convincing the world you're okay. Eventually, people believe you. And sometimes, you start believing it too. Until one day something strange happens. You feel exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. You realize you've spent most of your life being strong for everyone else. But very few people have been strong for you. And that's when resentment quietly starts appearing. Not loud resentment. Not angry resentment. The quiet kind. The kind that sounds like, why am I always the one checking on everyone? Why does nobody ask how I'm doing? Why do I feel invisible? The painful part? Most easy children feel guilty for even asking those questions. Because they were taught that having needs feels selfish. So instead of expressing disappointment, they suppress it, again, and again, and again, until loneliness becomes familiar. Here's something fascinating. Many easy children grow into adults who struggle to ask for help. Even when they're overwhelmed. Even when they're drowning. Even when support is available. Because somewhere deep inside, asking for help still feels wrong. They tell themselves, I can handle it. I don't want to bother anyone. It's not a big deal. But sometimes those words aren't confidence. They're survival strategies. Strategies that made sense years ago. Strategies that no longer serve them. And this creates another hidden problem. Relationships. Easy children often become partners who give endlessly. They listen, support, adapt, compromise, accommodate, but they rarely ask for the same things in return. Not because they don't want them, because asking feels uncomfortable. So they hope people will notice. They hope people will understand. They hope people will somehow read their minds. And when that doesn't happen, they feel disappointed, unseen, unimportant, not realizing they've spent years hiding the very needs they wish others would recognize. Pause again. Ask yourself something. How often do you say it's okay when it isn't? How often do you say, I'm fine, when you're not? How often do you shrink your own needs to keep everyone else comfortable? Those habits didn't appear out of nowhere. They were learned, practiced, rewarded, and eventually, they became part of your identity. But here's the twist most people never see coming. Being the easy child isn't always about becoming quiet. Sometimes it creates perfectionists, high achievers, people who constantly push themselves harder than everyone else. From the outside, they look successful, disciplined, driven. But underneath all that ambition is often the same question. If I'm impressive enough, will I finally be worth noticing? They chase achievements, recognition, validation, not because they're greedy, because they're hungry, emotionally hungry, trying to earn something they should never have needed to earn in the first place. Love, tension, importance, and no achievement ever fully satisfies that hunger. Because the wound was never about success. It was about connection. This is why some people reach goals they've dreamed about for years and still feel empty afterward. The promotion arrives. The money arrives. The recognition arrives. But the feeling they're searching for never does. Because accomplishments cannot replace emotional nourishment. Only genuine connection can do that. Only feeling seen can do that. Only believing your needs matter can do that. And that brings us to the most important realization in this entire story. The easy child wasn't actually easy. They were adapting. They were surviving. They were learning how to receive love by asking for less. And that's not maturity. That's emotional self-abandonment. The child wasn't strong because they needed less. They became strong because they received less. There's a difference. A very important difference. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Maybe that's why so many adults feel exhausted despite appearing perfectly fine. Maybe that's why some people struggle to receive help. Maybe that's why asking for support feels uncomfortable. Maybe that's why loneliness can exist even inside loving relationships. Because a part of them is still carrying an old lesson. A lesson that says, don't need too much. Don't be difficult. Don't take up space. But what if that lesson was wrong? What if your needs were never the problem? What if your emotions were never too much? What if the reason you're exhausted isn't because you're weak, but because you've spent years carrying everything alone? Because here's the truth. Healthy people don't become a burden when they have needs. They become human. And maybe nobody taught you that. Maybe you learned that love had to be earned. That approval had to be earned. That attention had to be earned. But real connection doesn't work that way. You don't earn the right to matter. You already matter. You don't earn the right to be heard. You already deserve to be heard. And you don't have to become smaller to be loved. The easy child spent years trying not to inconvenience anyone. Trying not to need too much. Trying not to take up space. But healing begins when you stop treating your needs like a problem. When you stop apologizing for being human. When you stop measuring your worth by how little you ask for. Because the child who learned to survive by asking for less deserves something different now. They deserve to be heard. They deserve support. They deserve connection. And most importantly, they deserve to stop carrying everything alone. So if this story felt familiar, if parts of it felt uncomfortably accurate, then maybe the goal isn't becoming stronger. Maybe you've already been strong for far too long. Maybe the real challenge is allowing yourself to be seen. And for someone who spent a lifetime being the easy child, that might be the bravest thing you'll ever do.